Right, YouTube, Shadow King Nazru, and since due to PlayStation and Square Enix limits, I am unable to record the final battles of Final Fantasy VII Remake until a certain designated time that they seem to allow fans to do that. So in the meantime, I'm going to give you my overall thoughts of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Yeah, this is basically my review. Whether I'll be talking about the ending or not, we'll wing it. So, Final Fantasy VII Remake, naturally, is basically a retelling of the events of Final Fantasy VII, but with a modern gaming standards, with better graphics, updated gameplay, and so on and so forth. And the story is very interesting. Because ever since the PlayStation 3 tech demo, which I think came around 2007, I want to say 2007, uh, everybody has been waiting for a Final Fantasy VII remake for, well, I guess it's been about 13 years or so. And we just kept getting let on hints of why they couldn't do it at the time. The technology wasn't there, the staff wasn't there, they uh, wanted to do so many things. And then we got a PlayStation 4 trailer, and we finally said, yes, the Final Fantasy remake was coming. But then all these things happened, like uh, it was good. The excuse me, oh God, pop-ups. Sorry, just a bunch of stupid things about our software. But anyway, there was these. When we finally got the trailer, it said they were going to be taking it into like multiple parts. It wasn't going to be fully turn-based, and so on and so forth. And the fan base had mixed opinions about that. Some people were open to these changes, others were not, and just wanted to be purists and said that if it wasn't the actual Final Fantasy game experience, but with just better graphics and voice then they weren't going to buy it. Yeah, those purists. You guys got to bear in mind that as much as I love the original Final Fantasy game, it still did have its problems. Like there were a few plot holes and the translation errors. Ooh boy, the translation errors. But anyway, eventually we did get the remake, and let's talk about it. I think the first thing I should get out of the way is the gameplay. Um, Now, the original Final Fantasy VII remake was, I wouldn't say fully turn-based, because it had the ATB system, which is the active time battle system. And when the bar goes fully, that would allow you to be able to do one of your special attacks, and you would have to wait. And during that time, either the opponent or you can take an opportunity. And you can make it faster depending on certain spells, which you would use materia for, or I heard some sort of system change could make things go faster or slower. But I've never personally did that, so I can't exactly verify that. Whereas the remake, it takes in the more action RPG things, but still keeps the elements of the original. A lot of people want to say that this is just like Kingdom Hearts series, but that's not the case. As Kingdom Hearts, you're focused mostly on being very, very maneuverable and trying to defeat the enemy while getting hit with as little as possible, if not at all. And that's why the whole mechanics of the game is focused on that aspect, and it rewards you for not getting hit and punishes you for getting hit. Which is why you have like an invincible guard, all these acrobatic moves, and so on and so forth. It's kind of similar to Dark Souls. So I've heard, because that's also a game that requires you not to get hit, or you'll get severely punished for it. Final Fantasy VII Remake, you're almost guaranteed to get hit, and unless you're like insanely good, know how to counter all the opponent's attacks, you're practically guaranteed to get hit. What you're supposed to do in Final Fantasy VII Remake is to minimize the damage you receive by blocking or dodging. So, and even when you dodge, you'll still get hurt if you don't time it right. And you're supposed to attack your enemy while filling your ATB gauge, so you can unleash your special moves or your limit breaks or your magic, so you can deal out the real damage. And that makes it really interesting, because a lot of people's fears that this was just going to be some stupid button masher with no thought to it whatsoever, a la Final Fantasy 15, for what I've heard from Final Fantasy 15 fan, or their detractors anyway, saying that there wasn't much strategy to it. You could pretty much just button mash your way to victory and blah blah blah. That's not the case here. You definitely need strategy in this, because if you just think you can just button mash your way to all the way to the final boss, no, you can't. There are some enemies that do require strategy. Like there's this one enemy, the ghoul, where you have to switch between using physical attacks against the enemy and using magic attacks when it takes on another form. And if you just button smashing, you'll lose. So yes, there's definitely a lot of strategy, and it's also complemented by the materia system. While not as exploitable as it was the original, because we don't have all of them, and some of them were changed and also replaced. There you can get a lot of good, interesting combos, and do handle yourself pretty well even in hard mode. Which, yes, I am doing hard mode right now. And to some extent, it does live up to the title, but it's not hair-pulling, aggravatingly difficult. It just takes you to understand the mechanics of the bosses and just come up with the best strategy to deal with it. Now, going back to the materia thing, there are some pretty good combinations. Like, you could include the deadly dodge materia, which allows you to evade an opponent's attack and then counter with your own hit. And you could put the HP absorb materia, which I don't need to explain that. And if you put that together, every time you dodge it and hit the opponent, you can get certain health back, which could create this interesting vampiric leech sort of thing. You can add in the Magnify Materia, which is supposed to be the replacement for the All Materia, which allows to whatever spell you do becomes an area of effect thing. And with that, you could like cast attacking spells like fire, ice, lightning, wind, poison, so on and so forth, as on all the opponents on the field, or you could have it as a support thing, like you got give healing to all your party members, or buff them with a barrier, or buff them with haste, or so on and so forth. And that just creates interesting strategies, adds a lot of replay, really makes the game very immersive and interesting. And I'm really glad it did it. I think they found a perfect balance of how the gameplay should work. And another thing I like is that all the characters feel unique. You could say in the original Final Fantasy, and in some case the other games up until like, let's say Final Fantasy 10. I never played 9 or 8. I want to say it was up until like 10 that they started to make the characters start to feel more unique. You could say that a lot of the characters fought the same in the original, um, despite having different weapons and all. But here, they definitely feel their own. Cloud is the Mystic Knight character class, which is what was originally class before he was good this soldier. And your book's basically going to be focusing on melee attacks complemented by magic, and it's going to involve a lot of you doing heavy sword attacks, fast sword attacks, counters with your Punisher mode, and casting magic when necessary. Though you can't go too heavy with it because you're not like a heavy spellcaster. And another thing to keep in hard mode, yes, you should keep this in mind, because I kind of learned some of this in the hard way, no pun intended, is that you need to micromanage your MP. Because in hard mode, you don't get it back after you like do a mission, or as Raptons just say, just sleep it off, you'll be fine. Yeah, that doesn't work with the MP thing. Um, in the hard mode, it doesn't come back unless you destroy crates and use MK Mako shards to restore your MP. Um, but anyway, going back to Cloud, it definitely feels like he's like the physical hitter, and he'll be dealing with band damage with some complements of magic. Whereas Tifa feels like a character that came out of a fighting game like Dragon Ball Fighters or Street Fighters or Tekken or so on and so forth. And it's all about doing melee hits with your fists and your kicks. And she has a very monk style of fighting with martial art attacks. And it's all about using your speed to get in, to unleash your stronger combos and stronger attacks, all the way up to stagger the opponent so you can do some real damage. And with Barrett, he's the long-range character, but he can also be the tank. And also, depending on how you set him up, can be the spellcaster and the healer. Even though he doesn't really have the stats for it. And it feels really interesting because while his attacks don't seem all that great at first, but when you started shooting it up like a machine gun, and also having the armor-piercing overcharge and overrun and so on and so forth, he can do some good damage if you know how to play him properly, and he can also serve as the tank, absorbing some of the damage because he has a lot of health, and he has the lifesaver ability, which allows him to trade off some of his HP for any of the damage that the enemy might do to you and to your other party members. And then there's Aerith, who's like the typical white/black mage, whereas she's doesn't have a lot of health, and her her physical attacks are abysmal, the worst ever. But her magic stats and her MP stats are god tier. So if you're going to want to be anyone to be the spellcaster of the group, you go to Aerith. She has a lot of abilities that they expand upon, was like the Arcane Ward, which allows you to get extra spells in. So say like if you activate your Arcane Ward and you had Cloud use lightning magic on an enemy, they would be able to cast it twice, and it wouldn't cost them any extra MP. And that really goes well with the Magnifying Materia, because that also does that. So I think you get like 4 casts of that spell. And Aerith also has the other abilities like the Illustrious Shield, which can bounce attacks back at the opponent as long as they're attacking them in front of that shield, or the Fleeting Familiar, or the Sorcerer's Storm. So many other things that, if you play her right, Aerith can be pretty OP with her magic. Unfortunately, Red 13 was just the guest character, so we won't be able to see how he plays until Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, or whatever they decide to call it. which may come out in the next few years or so, depending on how much they want to cover the original Final Fantasy game. Which, in my ideal situation, um, would be up until like Aerith dies. Now, I think another thing we should talk about the enemies, and they really updated the enemies while still being respectful to the original source material. Um, Especially with the bosses, they've really amped it up and made it interesting. In the original, the Scorpion Sentinel was not all that difficult of a boss and wasn't all that interesting. But here in the remake, while you can defeat him easily if you have experience and you know what you're doing, they really do try to make him more dangerous with having him different phases, and he adapts his attacks. He can create a barrier, which you have to deal with, and shooting missiles, going from jumping off onto the wall, so some of the close range characters can't attack it, and you have to rely on like someone like Barrett to deal the long range damage, and that makes it really interesting. And the same thing can be said with other bosses, like like the Air Bomber. I mean, not Air Bomber, Airbuster. Airbuster is like one of the most interesting bosses in the game because you can determine how difficult it is because there's this one mission where you decide what abilities it shouldn't or shouldn't have. Like you can take its big bombers away so it doesn't deal as much damage with it or at all. You could take his AI core, so it has a slower rate response time to the opponents and won't be as aggressive and won't be quick thinking. Or you could take his the M units, which I'm not sure what that did, but I'm sure it hindered it in some way. Um, and you can also sell these components in time. But things like that. They even made some of the enemies that weren't actual bosses into actual bosses, like Hell House and Eligor. Those were just more like rare encounters, but they had a lot of health, and it could be. So one could argue they were kind of mini bosses, but not that much since they kept appearing every now and again. But they were full-fledged bosses, and that's really interesting that they show respect. If I had a certain complaint about the gameplay, it's that the air combat is garbage. Is that you can attack with your non-range characters, but it's the cam work is so awkward and you can't always stay up. So it makes hitting aerial attacks, aerial enemies difficult without using magic or Barret or Aerith. Now a lot of people say, why don't you just use the jump button? Well, there is no jump button, and Final Fantasy VII wasn't that kind of game. It's not it's not like Kingdom Hearts where you have a jump button, and thus it would be easy to do aerial combat. So yeah, that's a problem, and I hope that it's one that they fix in in Final Fantasy Remake, like have Tifa's Star Shower ability be able to reach aerial enemies and do some massive damage, or have Cloud you do the Blade Beam or the Blade Burst that as is known in this remake to be done here. But all in all, the gameplay is good and it's well known, with a few issues that they can improve on in the future. Let's go on to the story and the characters. For the most part, the story is mostly how it was in the original with the events, albeit a few changes to expand upon a few things and also to make it work better and build some better character. It goes all the way from when a Cloud and Avalanche bomb the Sector 8 reactor all the way to when they rescue Era from Shinra and go to hunt down Sephiroth. But there's a few changes in there. Um, like they expanded on how Cloud and Avalanche would get their money from the community at Sector 7 and give them characters, NPCs, and side missions, which add interesting things. We got to see that what Tifa was life was like during the past 5 years, between when Cloud rescued Tifa from Sephiroth and to the events of Final Fantasy VII. And it's really interesting how she has a lot of respect of the people and really feels immersive. Barrett, you get to see more of his character. Now, a lot of people felt that his depiction in the original was racist. I could kind of see where they're going. I personally didn't have a problem with it, but I can understand it. And while I originally didn't like his voice acting in either with the original cast or this remake cast, um, I've kind of gotten used to it. I won't say I still would have preferred someone like Michael J. White or Phil Lamar to be Barrett to do their Phil Lamar to do his Jon Stewart voice, or Michael J. White to do his like Black Dynamite or Spawn voice for him. That would have been good, but it's servable. We got to see Barrett uh, be very more compassionate towards his teammates and have is more relationship with them. Got to see what his feelings were towards the main branch of Avalanche, because they're like a subsection of it that kind of did things that the main faction didn't enjoy, so they just kind of had a, as he put it, amicable separation. We also got to see how an emotional weight that he has with the whole Shinra thing, and while him trying to move, I mean, how he trying to find closure by getting revenge on Shinra, but also trying to look out for the other people, and he really lives for the underdog, which is really, really good stuff. Um, and he, and while he is passionate and he can be a bit of an eco warrior at times, that doesn't mean he's not all too serious. Like a lot of people fear that this game might be, because it was a remake and it's more modernized, and they thought they would take the game too seriously. But no, it still has fun with it. Like even Barrett even like hums the victory fanfare that's part of classic Final Fantasy. He does it every now and again, even in certain cutscenes. So yeah, he's still passionate, but and does have his dark moments, but he's still a fun character. With Cloud, they did try to keep him with the aloof, stoic personality, looking out for mostly for himself. Uh, thing that he had in the original part 1 of Final Fantasy VII, but they realized that it was going to be multiple parts, and they need to make Cloud relatable and likable. Otherwise, it's going to just seem very one note and boring. So they added in some of his later character developments into here, and you can see his compassion towards other people. He's starting to relate to them more. He's not as cold and indifferent, and he's starting to join the cause. But it feels organic. Like at first, he was doing this for the paycheck, and also because some of the people were his friends. But he also starts to sympathize with them once he gets to know them better. Like I want to get into that a look. I wanted to talk about like this one scene, but it requires talking about Big Wedge, and Jesse. So I want to save that for later when I talk about them. Um, but yeah, we get to see Cloud helping out the community, and he starts to be more empathetic and gets more relatable to these characters, which is really good stuff, and makes people who even didn't like Cloud in the original start to understand Cloud more here. And that's what I like about this remake, is that they are taking aspects of the original and some of the scrapped ideas and put it in here and reworking it so it actually makes sense in this new storyline. Oh, it's really good stuff. Arif, There's not much has changed. She still has the innocent vibe to her, but you can say they gave her a little bit more personality with her being sassy like Cloud, but where Cloud's being sassy but like a likable asshole. Aerith is more sassy and in the flirtatious kind of way. She'll make a snide remark, but she's all fun and perky, so you kind of still like her, and you can also tell the flirt thing. And yes, we still got the Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith love triangle, and depending on your choices, you can have a touching scene with either Tifa, Aerith, or depending on how you play things, even Barrett. Though I personally never unlocked it to because I'm Team Tifa all the way. That's Cloud X Tifa is my ship. And as far as Red 13 go, again he was a guest character, so we didn't have much to work with, but he was more knowledgeable, and he does share some jokes, so maybe they'll build up his character more. I also liked how they fixed some of the plot holes in the story. Um, like for one example, at when Avalanche is getting ready to bomb the Sanctified Reactor. In the original, when right before they're about to leave, they're confronted by President Shinra. And considering how hot-blooded and passionate Barrett is, you'd figure he would shoot the man on sight. That wouldn't have been a smart idea, depending on with the whole being surrounded and whatnot. But Barrett tends not to think things through. Um, which is why sometimes he can be argued not to be a good leader in a long-term situation. But it didn't make any sense, according to his character, why he didn't shoot President Shinra in the game. Here in the remake, it makes sense because President Shinra is not actually there. They used hologram visual droids to provide a projection, and that makes sense. And we also get to see interesting bits like them using the fake news narrative against Avalanche, which that was in the original, but it wasn't heavily focused on as it was here. Which also adds to the conflict between Barrett and President Shinra as he's constantly demonizing Avalanche with by making their actions seem a lot worse. Like example, when they blew up the reactor, it just blew up a small chunk of it, and it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. But Shinra had him and his people have destroyed the whole reactor, causing blackouts and burning buildings and so much disasters, uh, which makes the people turn against Avalanche, all for their own greedy purposes. Like with starting another war with Wutai, as spoiler, and creating Neo Midgard. It's going to be it's one of their plans, and I do like that. As like I said, it adds to the conflict. And while they did change how President Shinra dies, I mean, in the end he still dies, but it's more well earned because Barrett gets to have this moment against President Shinra, telling him that he wants his name cleared, and uh, uh, President Shinra tells him that the whole justice and honor and blah 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 is just stupid, vain indulgences, and that you probably don't even hold that as high esteem as you wanted to. Unlike me, I know what I want. I want money. I want power, and I'm willing to do anything I want. I mean, anything to get it. And if I can't get it, I'll just kill whatever's in my way. And it just feels real good and cathartic when he ultimately dies. It's those kind of good stuff that makes the remake really fleshed out. Um, and we also got to see elements from the compilation, or to some people is known as the Final Fantasy VII Expanded Universe, as we see some characters that were in there, and also some story beats from there, like Leslie Kyle, who was in the Children Are Alright story, and he's featured in this game as one of the lackeys of Don Corneo, albeit a reluctant one. I don't want to go into the story, but if you see my playthroughs or play the game yourself, you'll understand what it is. And it's nice because in the original, the expanded universe or the compilation, whichever you want to go with, some of the things worked, but other things didn't because of like continuity issues and so on and so forth. But here it's a clean slate. They can interpret elements of what it is and make it work better. It's kind of like what the Star Wars Disney canon stars would have should have done with the expanded universe in 1 through 6, but didn't, and now it's a complete train wreck. And we were better off with 1 through 6 in the expanded universe. I mean, not that I hate 1 through 6 in the expanded universe. Far from it, I love it, but God, Disney ruined it. But let's not get into that, shall we? Now we should probably talk about the ending, but I don't want to because, well, I haven't recorded to it and it'd be a bit of a spoiler. But then again, I'm already kind of doing spoilers, but anyway. Okay, so, yeah, I think I'll talk about it. So, with the ending, it turns out that the ghosts, the Watchmen of Fate, or as known as actually known as the Arbiters of Fate, are basically the people trying to keep all the events that happen with Final Fantasy VII, make sure it goes the exact same course. And it's basically a lot of the fans realize that it's a meta explanation, a metaphor for the fans who wanted the Final Fantasy VII Remake to be just the same game and with just updated graphics and voice acting. Whereas the people at Square Enix wanted to do Final Fantasy VII, but give it a twist and turns to offer a new experience to new players and veteran players. So they did that, and the whole thing at the end is about the whole defying fate thing. And it turns out that when when they are fighting them, they get flashes of what's supposed to happen in the future, and we get the one bit where it's 500 years past the events of Final Fantasy VII, and the whole Midgar is overrun by vegetation and whatnot. And from what I've been told, that humanity no longer exists. So, oh boy. They said that was considered a bad ending. So, if you liked that ending in the original, you might be rubbed off the wrong way, because I know a lot of people didn't like how. I mean, they felt that added a bit of nuance to the story and made us question if we don't take care of the planet, that the planet might get rid of us, sort of like a cautionary tale. And and that's part of the reason why some people don't like Advent Children, because the humans were still alive, and it kind of flew in the face of that theory. Uh, if you buy into that, you might not like this. Though I personally don't like the whole getting rid of the humans just to keep the planet safe. I feel like the humans should still exist, but they should better take care of the planet. So I'm open to this, them getting a new ending. But it's all about them fighting the fate, and ultimately leading up to a final battle with Sephiroth, who is aware of what happens in the original timeline with Final Fantasy VII and Advent Children and Dirge of Cerberus and blah blah blah, and he's trying to change events here to make sure that he ultimately wins and gets what he wants. Cast down a meteor, have it attack the planet. He absorbs the live stream and becomes a god. That old jazz. And not only is he aware of the future, it turns out Aerith is also aware of the future. I'm assuming through the live stream, or it could be that their future selves bonded with to the body of their past selves. So it's kind of complicated. I don't know which one it's going to be. Hopefully Square Enix can um, illuminate on that. And they also again added uh, these whisper enemies who basically are like these um, ghost-like versions of Lol's Kadaj, and I forgot what the other character's name was. It was basically the remnants of Sephiroth from Advent Children. They appear in there, and you get to fight them before you fight Sephiroth. As for them fighting Sephiroth, while it is a great spectacle and a great fight, and even includes some stuff from Advent Children, which I really did enjoy because I love Advent Children, albeit it does have its problems. I I feel like fighting Sephiroth here kind of undermines the impact of fighting him in the final act. I don't think they should have fought Sephiroth here, or if it did, it should have been done differently. Like there was this one new character named Roach who was a soldier third class. It was interest and it was think about that like that hot rod jackass that you always meet on the roads who tries to show off and be annoying. And he has this kind of rivalry with Cloud in like chapter 4 of the game. And once you beat him, you never see him again. Um, I feel like what they should have done was have Roche want to become more powerful and be a better rival to Cloud. So he tries to ask Shinra and Hojo to um, make him from a third class soldier to a soldier first class and get whatever enhancement he needs. And thus we have Cloud, the false first class soldier, spoiler alert for some people who didn't play the original, and Roach, who is the new soldier first class, and have them fight Cloud. And it's a really tough battle. And you're thinking, wow, if this guy who just became a soldier first class can give us a run for his money, how bad would fighting Sephiroth be, who's supposed to be the greatest warrior in all of the franchise? And if we were to add Sephiroth, he comes in down and he pretty much explains his plan. He's going to change fate of the story. And they try to stop him, but they fail miserably because they're not on Sephiroth's level just yet. They need to go out through the rest of the story before they can fight him and defeat him. I think that's what they should have done. Now, granted, and even in the remake, they don't technically defeat him because Sephiroth and Cloud have like one personal duel, and Sephiroth wins the clash. But I still think that fighting him and doing as well against him as we did still kind of undermines it. But all in all, I still say that the story is good, but the ending had some questionable moments that should have been fixed. Now, albeit it's too late, but the best thing to do is hope for that they handle this new situation well, and hopefully what changes they do make sense, but also still keeps the same story beats as Final Fantasy VII Remake. Because we don't want these because we don't want them to make changes that don't make sense and destroy what makes Final Fantasy VII. Like there was this one scene where we see a flashback to Zack Fair having his last stance against Shinra, and he was supposed to die there, but due to destroying the Arbiter of Fates, he survives the encounter. Now that's going to create pause because Cloud, in his messed up memories, based his personality on Zack and how a soldier should be. And if Zack is still alive, then that kind of ruins Cloud's storyline. That kind of ruins Arrow's storyline, and also ruins the theme of the that death happens and you have to accept and move on with things. And it's final. You can't get these things back. Now, I heard that it might be taking place in an alternate timeline from the remake timeline, and if that's the case, that might help things a bit. Um, but we'll have to see how these things play out. But I'm willing to be optimistic with it because overall they did pay respect to the original source material, um, and the changes. Let's just hope for the best. Uh, the we could talk about some other miscellaneous things like the music. The music, it's pretty good. It's mostly the same stuff, albeit remixed to have these different tones, and you can even collect music pieces to. And they also added some new ones, which were pretty good. A lot of people like the stand-up one and the new one, Hollow, which was even done by uh, the boy Uematsu. And who that's you gotta commend the guy for doing the hard work despite his old age and his poor health. That's really good, and everybody really does love this rendition of the One Winged Angel. We thought the original was great. The Advent Children one was phenomenal, and this new one is oh god yes, it's legendary. Oh, great stuff. So another problem with the music. As for like content, like I said, you do get side missions, and um, for the most part, they don't feel like filler because they do tie into the main story. Like for the one mission, you have to fight this mutated Shinra dog in like chapter 3 of the game, and if you do complete the mission, the one of the NPCs will mention that there is this rumor of an underground Shinra lab lab facility under Sector 7, and after Sector 7 has its collapse, and you go into the secret lab, and it turns out it's true, and you get to fight enemies there. So it does play into the main story, which I do like. If it adds to the characters and or adds to the story, then it's not filler. Though I think the only thing that felt like filler to me was the part where they go into the train graveyard and deal with this whole ghost thing. That was the only thing that felt like filler because that just felt like it was padding out the time when so the characters wouldn't realistically make it to time to stop Shinra from having Sector 7 collapse. And I didn't feel like it added much to the characters. I mean, or anything. To it just kind of felt like filler. And as for other content, you do get some post game in content, like with the Chatley and Shinra VR missions, which allows you to get these interesting materials like the auto cure materia or some other classes, one like HP absorb, MP absorb, steal, a sense, or as it's known as assess, and even some summoning materia like Ifrit, Fat Chocobo, Leviathan, and Bahamut. Ah, yeah. And they have their own various challenges, so you have to think about how to deal with it, especially with Bahamut. He is the king of the dragons, after all, and one of the most powerful summons until Knights of the Round comes in. And oh boy, I really want to see how they handle Knights of the Round. Because Knights of the Round in the original could one shot Sephiroth. Oh boy, that was. Um, yeah, and there's also the Don Corneo Coliseum in Wall Market where you could have like these various matches and earn rewards. And you could also play hard mode, which is what I'm doing right now, for like these manuscripts, which allows you to get more SP, which you can use to upgrade your weapons. Yeah, I forgot to mention in the gameplay you can upgrade your weapons and make them more relevant. Which is, I think, the idea that they took from Kingdom Hearts 3, which makes sense because the director of Final Fantasy VII Remake is Tetsuya Nomura, who was the director and creator of the Kingdom Hearts series. And that's really interesting. So if you want to like stick with just using the Buster Sword, and you can upgrade it to like make it still relevant and have all these stats and abilities. You could have uh, one weapon that's more built for a utility, one that's more for building all out damage, one that's building for more defense, and so on and so forth. It's really adds a lot of variety and replay value. So it's all good stuff. I think that's pretty much covers everything. So all in all, I would have to give Final Fantasy VII Remake a 9.5 out of 10. It's really great stuff, but the ending just kind of hurts it a bit. But depending on how they handle it in the sequels, I might change that score to maybe like a 9.7, 9.8. We'll have to see. But almost really great game. Really does go out for the characters and the story and the gameplay. Everything's been updated and improved upon, and I highly recommend you buy this game. So those are all my thoughts on the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I'll catch you guys later.